Hey, my name is Tonga, and today I'm going to be going over my production on the track that I did for Rocket League in season 6 called Another Round. I'm going to be going over production techniques, how I wrote it, and what I was thinking in order to create the track. So let's get right into it. All right, so for the intro, I have Rhodes, just the kicks, and a Juno synth line. I'm using the Juno synth line as a fanfare to introduce everything, give it some energy in the very beginning. All it is just a stacked pentatonic line, and with some delay and reverb on it, so it sounds like this. And then I'm panning it left and right. I'm playing a 4-chord loop. Chords are C minor 7, B flat minor 7, G altered dominant, and a flat major 7. And that actually is the entire song, except for the B section, which is just 1 chord. But predominantly, like 90% of the song is just those 4 chords. So in a previous video, when I was doing a breakdown for Windows Down, I talked about how if there's not a lot of stuff going on in the harmony, what ends up happening is, like, to create intrigue that lasts the entire song, the arrangement itself does a lot of the heavy lifting. So you'll see that in this song as well. So after this little kind of fanfare in the beginning, the first half of the cycle, or the first 2 cycles, second cycle, I bring in the guitar, playing a bit of a melody or a reference to the melody slightly, and just playing along with the chords, just to give it some context or give it some kind of evolution within the intro. Then I drop in here with a line, chicken picking line that was just octaves, and I'm panning this left and right just to give it that just wide sense. Right into the melody. All right, so for the melody, so what I'm doing here, if you can notice, I have a lot of space in this Rhodes line. It's just a hit, space, and then there's a lot of space in here, which I wrote the guitar line to kind of fill in. So it's this kind of dialogue between the two that really make up the melody. So if you listen to the Rhodes and the guitar, just the music is just bouncing between those two. Tons of space. So Rhodes, guitar. Just an easy call and response. Always attractive. Always works when you're composing or producing. So it went with that. The bass is playing along with the timing of the Rhodes. Just to beef it up. And what I'm doing here is the bass line. I'm only using roots and fifths and the octave of each chord. Nothing especially fancy, just good rhythm and spacing. But roots and fifths will really just take care of business. I was taught at an early age when I was learning bass that is the core element. If you have those, you can play a lot of different types of music and really fulfill the role of the bass. Just establishing the root, but also not getting in the way by being too fancy and just stealing the spotlight off other instruments or a singer or whatnot. But it's a good example of how melodic you can be with just a root, fifth, and octave. Just going up, I go up and then down, start on the octave and then come back down. And it just creates enough movement so it's not entirely, just stale, like, just the root on downbeats. So all of them together. Let's do this. Just creates a nice interplay. Then moving on to the drums, I have this. So breaking down the drums, it's really revolving around this loop, another drum loop from Jake Nager's Dirty Money Breaks, link down below. This has such a nice pocket and swing to it that fit with what I was originally doing. So I use that as my kind of like the main ingredient. I just enhanced it by adding the kick and snare sounds, one shots here and here. I think I'm using a count snare, and I don't know where I got this sample, to be honest, for the kick. So that's the main groove going on right now. What I add there, just to give it a little bit more high frequency, just shimmer, or just more presence on the high end, I bring in a tambourine loop. Sounds like this. So it has a little bit of swing as well, adding to the drum loop of Jake Nager's. And then what I do is just to add a little bit of pump, I use this LFO tool just to duck on the downbeats. And then together. And then I add a shaker here just to kind of give it a little bit of ear candy. With all of these together, I'm going to come in halfway. With all of these together. Also, what I'm doing here is my main melody is this part. It's in response to the Rhodes. And then what follows afterward is kind of an internal call and response within the guitar part. So on the first half of the melody, I kind of leave it open. You could see, so this is where it splits. This cycle and then that cycle. I'm just playing kind of a lead in here. And then here. It's all very understated. But on the second side, it's a little bit more pronounced. And that's since I'm doing the same thing over 4 whole cycles, I need to give it a little bit of a push because nothing is really changing. And so any additional thing that's being added toward the next section is just coming from the guitar. And so each second half of these cycles, I'm just slowly building it up for a handoff at the very end, which is going to be like this. So the previous one here, let's see, here was like high energy, and then I go back to low energy because I'm trying to do like a nice handoff to this big old section that's about to follow up. I like to do that anytime I'm ending a solo or like a section. I like to have a really calm or smooth handoff. Not all the time. There are times where you want to actually hand it off at a high energy and then just keep the energy going. But I tend to tie up my phrases or section that I'm playing in or soloing in kind of nicely and just kind of tie it up with a nice bow. So that's what's happening there. So not much going on here. Again, it's just the drum track, which is not a ton of stuff. Just a solid 4-chord loop, some good interaction between the melody and the chords, and then the bass line that's melodic but out of the way, super important. And then goes into the B section. So I said, like, if we look at this most of the song is this 4-chord loop. It's like 90% of the song. Arrangement wise, I'm like, okay, I need something to break away from that A section, that 4-chord loop, just to give me a breather, or give the breather for the audience, and then make that 4-chord loop fresh again when it does come back in. So what I decided to do is stick on C minor and basically create a lot of contrast arrangement wise by adding a ton more drums and then flipping the role of the melody and the bass, where what you're going to hear is the guitar and the bass are going to play in unison and they're the melody. So instead of the melody being on top, I'm flipping it onto the bottom. So there's more freedom of movement on the bottom. And then in order to keep a consistency or a pattern, to keep it kind of grooving harmonically, I have 3 different sounds that are going to play a repeated pattern, ostinato pattern, that keeps it steady, but from the top. Like, so the top frequencies are holding it down and then the bottom is moving. So go ahead and listen. We have that. These things. So again, this part, let's see, this, and this. I have these 3 different synth sounds. Well, this is a Celeste, I think. Glockenspiel. And then a high Juno synth sound. And then I believe this is a whole octave below. Yeah. They all really blend nicely together. And again, it's just that repeated 4-note pattern, 6-note pattern that just contributes to keeping it steady and consistent. So because the bass is not playing, an ostinato pattern, which is usually what happens, just flipping the roles on the frequencies and putting up on top. I also have this keyboard sound, which is essentially an operator, not preset. Well, I guess my own preset. I made this myself. And then with some RC20 to give it some space, some color with the distortion, a little bit of wobble to get that lo-fi feel. But I also have a pitch envelope here. So without it, it's just going to play, it's just going to play straight. So with the pitch envelope on this operator, it revs into the, it's detuned initially and revs into the correct pitch. So I also put some delay on it just to put it in the back. That feeling that it's in the back. Kind of in your face, but then just lingers. Bass and guitar line. Just unison. Essentially just melodic licks. And this is just in spaces. So if I just do the... And here's another... Every time I'm playing in between, so we look at this, I am also playing in the spaces. So I play this keyboard line. Respond. So again, a lot of call and response. It's the kind of easiest thing to do to create intrigue. And I'm definitely using it a lot in this track. So it's a great effect. So you can see that I'm essentially doing, change it up a little bit, but that's what's happening here. The timing is kind of handing off between those 2 parts. Let's go to the drums, which, I mean, as you can see, this A section looks and sounds. It's a nice groove in the A section. I continue it on, but I've added a bunch more layers. So what's happening here is I'm continuing the kick and snare, but I'm adding 2 claps to get that, funk party sound. And then on this pattern, so it sounded like this in the main groove, and then turns into, just to add some I made it into more of a texture than the actual like groove, or it keeps the groove, but it's because I use the auto filter to chop out the top and bottom frequencies. It sounds like more of just like a dirty texture in the background. And I'm doing that because I have all of these other things here that I'm adding: 2 triangles, a tambourine, and 2 shakers that I want to bring up front. So what is happening is by chopping these frequencies out, these can kind of take the space that is left from cutting them out. So the triangles, though, I actually I tuned them lower. 42 steps down, and this one a whole octave down, 12 steps. So and then together. So it's this like low metallic sound, mid-range metallic sound, kind of trashy sounding. And then I have a tambourine just in spots, just to give it a little bit of that groove. Shaker, I tuned down a little bit. And then also this one. So it's a nice kind of like deep percussion section. And all together, open hi-hat. That's how I did it. So my main thing that I want to talk about is I always talk about contrast. By adding all these textures that weren't here in the A section and also cutting out some frequencies, it really changed. The groove is still there. Like this pattern, that swing is still there, and it's still present in all of the different things I played and recorded into this. The groove is still there, but now replacing it with a bunch of different percussion instruments gives it just a new life at this point. Adding some, taking some away, and then it sounds like a big party up in this section. So now in terms of arrangement of, I just wanted to point out one more thing. One thing I like to use it always sounds great and it feels good is kind of like a spotlight arrangement technique where you literally pull the rug on most of the arrangement to spotlight one section or one or two instruments, and it just really like hyper focuses on it and then explodes back into like the full arrangement. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm literally just playing all the way up to it, and then when everything comes back in, it has more energy. With a crash on the 2 is just a simple funk technique. Oh, and then at the end of this, I am bringing back this Juno sound again to kind of lead in and transition into the solo section. So it's a nice, just easy callback, and it also lasts a while. So it's kind of like a nice handoff too. So it's a smooth transition. I always try and find something that will bridge sections without it being too abrupt. So here I'm spotlighting the piano solo by this is actually the only section where the drums aren't playing other than the very, very beginning. So it really puts the intention on the piano solo, and I just have the Rhodes and the bass in here. Halfway through, I bring in a little bit of the drums and sneak the pattern in. And then we're all the way in. So nothing especially specific here. I'm just soloing. I guess when it comes to my solo, you can see just visually here. This is really why I love MIDI, is to visualize what I'm doing sometimes and be like, oh, okay, that's how I'm thinking or playing. You can see my solo goes like up and down. So there's like dynamics in terms of pitch. There's space built in. I mean, these chunks of space I leave open for the phrase to breathe. And then just kind of building it up. I like the highest note is near the end. So I'm, getting to the climax of the solo at the very end and then dipping all the way down. Let's see. Okay, in the solo, one thing that I did here is I used a rhythmic motif and just displaced it. So it's not always, it's so da 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 da. So instead of just going on like it falls on the downbeat or the upbeat, each time exactly, I displace it a little bit. And that's a technique that is really fun to use like when you're writing and then soloing. It combines the predictability of, okay, this is a motif. It's a short pattern that you're going to use and you can follow along with, but by displacing it a little bit each time, it makes it funkier and funkier. And so there's the unpredictability of, okay, when is that pattern going to start? And that's something that I always have fun with if I can sneak it in there. So. And I hand it off again, back to the A. I make sure I get to the end smoothly and then hand it off exactly. I stop here and then the guitar comes in right there. So. All I'm doing here, I'm cutting out the drums again or stripping it down to spotlight, just to give it a bit more of a punctual, like, hey, we're here now. We're at the next section. And then what I'm doing here with the guitar melody, I believe I pitched one of them up 12. Yes. Or pitched it down 12. And again, it's panned to the left and right. So not only is everything dropped out when I play this, that line, I give it some texture and width. So it's like really in your face. Whereas the normal guitar part is just dead center. So. Then I just take it home. Nothing much else to it. I fade out. Yeah. Fading out to this end. Add a little sauce at the end. And then just, smooth it out. All right, so that's pretty much it for this song. Pretty straightforward. Not a lot of crazy production techniques, just little, kind of tricks here and there. It's a 4-chord loop, essentially, with a deeply contrasted B section. But I really focused on, there's not a lot of instruments either. It's just really kind of, you can play this live pretty easily. Just drums, keys, guitar, and bass. To keep the audience interested, I needed to have the arrangement be interesting within, those small amounts of instruments. So it was essentially like creating dialogue between different, instruments or within itself, like with the guitar, making sure just everything grooved well all the way throughout. And then, all right, so that's pretty much the whole track. It's pretty straightforward. It's essentially just a 4-chord loop played throughout with just a small B section that takes you out, that's contrasting deeply with those 4 chords to make the loop again, the harmonic loop, fresh again. But outside of that, it's just small little techniques that I use to keep the interest of the listener the whole way through. So I think this is a good kind of example of being strategic on how you bounce ideas around, like between the melody and the bass, like how they interact. And then also on a bigger picture, just like section to section, it can create a nice shape to the song that people can follow and, take to the end or ride to the end. Let me know in the comments below if you like this production breakdown, and specifically if there was any detail that I went over that helped line up something for you in your own production or you want to try. Thanks again for joining me. Hit that subscribe button, share it with your friends, producer friends, or anybody who's a fan of the music. And I'll see you next time. Take care.